With a name straight off a Kraftwerk album, I must confess to never having heard of multimedia intelligence transfer before. Atlas I do know, obviously, as well as Megami Tensei Gaiden. Renowned for its brutality, the Shin Megami Tensei series, Shin just means true, by the way, has many entries and spin-offs, including the famed Persona games. This first last Bible, not at all a confusing sentence to say, initially came out in 1992 on the original Game Boy, but only in Japan. Its full title was Megami Tensei Gaiden Last Bible, and spawned a few sequels, as well as a spin-off of its own, Another Bible. Look, I'm not going to try and explain the Shin Megami Tensei lineage to you because it's far too complicated and I'm not convinced I understand it myself. Anyway, Last Bible 1 was eventually Anglicised and made into a Game Boy Color game, this one called Revelations the Demon Slayer. It came out in Western areas in 1999. There was a Game Boy sequel released in 1993 that didn't get the translation treatment, but we will still be looking at its GBC re-release fairly soon. Revelations, when it first hit Western shelves, was often mislabeled as a Pokémon-inspired RPG, mostly because people didn't realize that the 99 edition was a remake of a 7-year-old game, so it's not at all a fair moniker. Its similarity to the aforementioned might have been part of the reason it finally got translated, who knows, but a copy of Pokémon? Not in the slightest. The story here goes that long before human beings existed, there were 3 powers: telepathy, teleportation, and telekinesis that only gods could harness, and this was named Gaia. You start in your hometown, about to embark on your last day of Gaia training, when suddenly monsters start attacking people. One of the leaders heads off to a sacred mountain to save some errant children, and tasks you to follow. Storyline-wise, this isn't any revelation, really, sorry, but as RPGs go, the gameplay is what's vital here. At first, it seems like quite a standard Final Fantasy-style turn-based adventure. You walk around the overworld, bumping into enemies at random and proceeding to whack them to death with your sword or otherwise fire some magical powers at them. You earn experience points and money, return to town to improve your gear, and so on. Eventually, you'll meet other team members and get stronger as your adventure continues. The leveling up system is pretty cool. When you earn enough experience points to elevate your character, you're given a stat point that can be allocated to either strength, intelligence, endurance, luck, or speed in order to augment that skill, which in 1992 was the first time we'd had such a mechanic on the Game Boy. You really don't need to grind too much to get the most out of this system though, as long as you buy the best armor and weapons each time they're available, and they never really cost that much and you'll have enough just from your normal journey. Things will often die before they can even attack you. Putting a couple of early stat points into your speed ensures you'll be quicker than most enemies, at least early on. Where the gameplay shines, and where the Pokémon comparisons come about, is this talking mechanic. Sometimes upon being in a battle, an enemy can talk to you. You can also initiate the conversation yourself. Here, instead of fighting, you'll begin to negotiate with the enemy, canvassing them to join you. There'll be a series of yes or no questions that dictate whether or not the negotiation will be successful. Things like, do you understand our pain? Or do you really think I should join you? Your answers aren't the only thing that decides the outcome. It seems to have something to do with the strength of the character you choose to answer the monster in comparison to the monster's own, or something like that. Once a part of your squad, you can look at their stats and see what their strengths are. You can now tell them to bugger off if you like, as there are only a certain number of spaces available in your team. You can have 3 humans and 3 monsters at any one time, but others can be summoned from ones you've caught before. Once in your party, monsters can still talk. They'll often converse with other enemies you might face. If they're weaker than your team, a wild monster might ask the one in your party not to attack, and instead spare them. They'll simply walk away, allowing you to avoid the battle. You won't get any experience or money, but like I say, grinding isn't really a necessity here. The monsters you convince to join you don't level up, so you'll need to constantly upgrade them. If they get KO'd in battle, there's no way to resurrect them other than to pay a hefty fee at the inn. Truthfully though, the majority of companionable monsters only serve as supplementary damage and attack sponges in battle anyway. You're gonna have to work to get the stronger ones, so for the most part, treat the monsters as the expendable fodder they are and don't worry too much if they don't quite make it. The game is somewhat hampered by strange movement programming. What was intended, I think, is this continuation of movement should you walk into a wall or obstacle. Say you were moving to the right and you walked into a wall, the character will automatically start to walk downwards without you having to change direction on your D-pad. I can't really understand why it was thought that this was a problem that needed to be solved, and furthermore, it created its own issue. Even tapping the D-pad instead of holding it can cause your character to move 2 tiles sometimes, which can make entering doors or talking to NPCs quite the frustration at times. You'll often walk past the intended target 2 or 3 times before managing to convince your dude to just step 1 space. It's weird and a little jarring at first. It doesn't take off too much shine to what is a properly entertaining RPG though. There's a lot of text, so the Game Boy Color version might be the one to go for, but as it is, Revelations, or Last Bible, is an interesting take on the standard turn-based RPG adventure, and one that certainly warranted this remake. The Pokémon comparisons aren't really fair, especially as this came the best part of 4 years beforehand. Quite ahead of its time, it's fair to say.